I was thinking about this video for a very long time, way too long. In fact, I was not just thinking about the video, I was visualizing it. I was trying to imagine how it would be to go through the first 5 seconds of the video, then 10 seconds, then try to imagine the structure of a lecture in my head. And I think that doing so was useful because it did give me a lot of ideas about the video and made me ready to perform it. But it took way too much time. And I'm not even sure that the product would not have been better had I just decided to start a video 2 weeks ago. And ironically enough, the topic of the video today is exactly this process. The process of visualization, how we can plan through a certain task, and the aim of this discussion is to try to make this visualization ideal for improving our ability to execute these tasks in a way that is both effective, which is a result that we want, and efficient, doesn't take too much time or effort. The kind of tasks that I'm going to discuss are the kind of tasks we usually discuss in these videos, primarily language learning and the use of language, academic pursuits such as writing or presenting, and my favorite metaphor, workouts at the gym, particularly regarding powerlifting. My name is Shai Dotan. I'm Associate Professor of International and Public Law at the University of Copenhagen Faculty of Law, and the purpose of this series of lectures is to help you improve your language skills and your English. The first thing I want to look at is the beneficial side of visualization, how it helps you to get ready for a specific task. One of the tasks that require the most preparation is a presentation before an audience. It's a very important part of an academic career. If you, for example, present at a conference or a workshop, it can be very useful in other situations. For example, if you are making an argument in court, or if you're just presenting to donors or investors or anybody else that is relevant in your field of occupation. You need to make a good presentation. And in order to make a good presentation, you need to prepare for it well, especially as a beginner. Later, once you're very, very experienced, you can prepare a little bit less. But I remember that for me, when I was giving lectures at the beginning of my career, I had a rule. And the rule was I never give a lecture before an audience before I gave it to the mirror or to an empty room at least 10 times. 10 times was the minimum. And I was very, very disciplined about it. Not just that it will be 10 times, but the 10 times will be as effective as possible because they are going to be as realistic as possible. Realism is very, very important. So for example, if I would give a lecture to an empty room, I would speak up. So I would not just be speaking in my head. I would walk around the room imagining that I'm in front of an audience, and every time that I made a mistake, I would not just stop the clock and try to start again. I would have to find a way to fix this mistake without indicating to the audience, if I would have such an audience in the room, that I'm aware that I made a mistake. So this would be a very, very complicated exercise in which I would basically be continuously going forward in speaking in a normal pace, while at the same time thinking about a way to add on information that I skipped over or fix any other mistake that I made as I was doing this exercise. So preparing for a lecture by simulating it is a very powerful tool, and it's a form of visualization because you're imagining the lecture, and the key to making it effective is really to make it as realistic as possible. So you actually train your mind to think as if you were in front of an audience with all the stress that it involved and the unexpected problems that can occur. Another way for visualization that I can face as an academic all the time is planning what I'm going to write. So when I sit down to write in any paper, I don't just sit down and write without a plan. I usually have a very, very clear plan of what I'm about to do. Now, one way to do that is to think about the problem deeply before I start to write. But a better way to do it is to actually note down on paper, or in my case, usually on a computer, what I plan to do in a paper in this particular section. What I usually do is I write in bullet points. So I put a dot and then I write the text and I highlight it in yellow. So it will be easy for me to notice that this text is not text that I'm actually intending for the paper itself, but this is just a way for me to organize my thoughts. And then I could move these bullet points around, change the order, add text or subtract or take away text. Everything is very, very easy to do when you're just playing around with the ideas. The beautiful thing here is that you are visualizing the paper in a way, but you're doing it in a way that keeps you always remembering what you have and organizes the idea in a very, very neat way. I almost always do that, and I find that it helps a lot. It saves a huge amount of time, because if you start to write and as you're writing you're also organizing your ideas, you realize that by the time you finish a paragraph that you said some things that you were not supposed to say because either they're not part of a paper or they should appear later, and then you have to start to rewrite the text. And today we're able to rewrite easily with a word processor, but every time we do that we damage the quality of the text, and we spend time that is really not needed. So planning ahead and visualizing is a very, very good technique. Now let's try to think about a situation where your job is a very, very simple one. It's not complicated, but it's also very difficult. And the best example I can think of is before a set that I would do at the gym. If it's a heavy set of squats or deadlifts or bench press, I know that what I'm going to experience the moment I start the set is a very strong sensation of pain. It is what we call in the gym good pain, hopefully, if I didn't make a mistake. So I don't injure myself, but it's going to be hard. And this difficulty is actually painful in a way. You feel your muscles straining, and it's our natural inclination to avoid this pain. You have to fight against your instinct in this respect, because you get basically go through the pain of exercise towards the result that you need. And this requires a very strong degree of focus. Before I would do the exercise, I would visualize it in a variety of ways. Some of them are technical, so I would try to really think about exactly where every part of my body and my clothes even would be at this particular second. If it's a very important set, then I can take several minutes to do that. Even if it's, let's say, before I go to my higher deadlift set, I would do 185 kilograms 5 times. I'm not so tired because I just warmed up, but I will still take a fair amount of time. It can be easily 3-4 minutes before I actually get ready to submit my body to this exercise. And I would really visualize the technique. And parts of it would be more in the form of a pep talk or a psychological preparation, when I would say to myself things like, I've been doing very similar sets for almost 2 years without failure, so why would I fail this time? And this particular, exactly this weight I already did last week and the week before that, and I'm able to do it, and I might encourage myself to get ready. So I visualize the exercise, and I try to combine with this technical visualization some form of psychological preparation that gets me ready. And finally, we move to what is the biggest challenge, and actually I think the most important topic of this lecture, because you know that I focus on language learning. For many of my viewers, this is English. For others, they know English well enough and they really try to focus on a third or fourth or fifth language. And that's really the preparation towards starting to speak in a different language. I have already been teaching for a while in Danish. I can tell you that getting ready to stand in front of a classroom and speak in Danish is not an easy thing. I know that my accent is not that good. I know that I still make mistakes as I speak, grammatical mistakes. I sometimes am left grasping for the right word, something that would not usually happen to me in Hebrew or in English, but it does happen in Danish. If somebody were to suggest this word to me, I would almost always know it. I would not need to check it in the dictionary. I would know the word, but it wouldn't really present itself quickly enough in my active memory. So I would try to visualize myself in front of this class, or even in front of a much more simple encounter. If it's a friend or colleague that I want to speak Danish with, I would really get prepared for that. Even when I start to talk with ChatGPT, and I have a video on that in the channel about speaking to a chatbot to improve my knowledge of languages, it's a useful tool, but I sometimes find myself for 15 minutes, I would just be thinking what I would say first, and then what we would say then, and what I would say in return. Is the good thing? There are positive aspects for it. I am preparing, in a way, for this conversation, and maybe the beginning will be slightly better. I believe that when you start to prepare for a stressful presentation, by focusing on the very, very beginning, you break some kind of a psychological barrier that allows you to succeed later on. So you come very well prepared, and then once you cross through the first 5 seconds, and you know how hard it was to cross that threshold in your mind, it actually comes much more naturally when you actually do it in real life, then you can continue forward and it becomes a bit easier. But at the same time, this is very time consuming, and this can be very, very stressful, and it also makes you, view it as a very difficult task. And that's exactly what I want to speak on next. How visualization can sometimes be a hindrance, an obstacle, rather than your tool to success. Acknowledging that there is a risk for visualization or over-visualization is important, because once you visualize things again and again and again, and you postpone what you wanted to do, visualization becomes procrastination. You are delaying the thing that you want to avoid, and you're accumulating all kinds of tension inside you that is maybe not necessary. So let's try to break down what are the problems that can arise from this negative visualization. I can think of 4 main problems. One problem is time. You spend time visualizing. You are not, fulfilling other deadlines. You could have used this time better for other things. Even if you don't think that you will be able to do that, just completing the task and getting it over with would open your attention to many other things at the same time. That's, by the way, something that I think is very important to note for anybody who wants to be an academic, but I'm sure that in our fields it's the same. The time consumed by a task is not just the time you actually sit down to do it. It's also the mental attention that is tied down to a particular task, and you avoid doing other things at the same time because of this tension. That's why one of the most effective rules that I always try to follow is that if a task takes less than 5 minutes, do it immediately. Because even if you spend just 2 seconds thinking about it for the next 48 hours, you are definitely short. So just do it now, immediately on the spot. And when I think about my work as an academic, I would even say any task that takes less than an hour, and you're sure it's going to be just an hour, try to get it down as quickly as you can, just to get it off your table. and that's something that is very useful. So when you are visualizing too much, you're procrastinating and you're wasting time, and this means that your other tasks will not be completed. The second thing is your fears are multiplying. So all this tension and stress is not something that you want to encourage. This is something that is unpleasant. This is something that makes you unmotivated to continue in this track forward. It just has only bad repercussions. You don't want your efforts to be constrained by this continuing feeling of being inadequate, being behind schedule, having an extra job to do, that you're afraid that you will not do that well. That's just something that causes stress. In addition to the time loss, that's another thing that you don't want to do. In addition to that, you can speak about the final product. Will it be necessarily better if you spend all this time visualizing? Sometimes the answer is yes, and then it's an effort worth making. But many times the answer is no. Okay, your first reaction, your instinctive reaction may be better. It may sound more natural, less artificial. You may even, because you will be more relaxed, the result would be better. So every time that you think that you have a very particular task to do, and you think that you can do it better in a shorter amount of time with less tension, obviously that's a no-brainer. You want to try to follow this result also. And the fourth element is that if you struggled through and you wasted all this time and you wasted all these negative emotions going into it, and you got a result that may be as good or even better than you would have reached easily, but then what about the next task that resembles this, and the next one and the next one? In all these tasks you will be again constrained to spend more time, again more likely to be stressed, and that's exactly what you want to avoid. And this is something that I think is relevant particularly to language learning. I put off talking to ChatGPT in Danish for like a month, something crazy like that, just trying to imagine how it would be. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense even with a human being on the other side, let alone if it's just a computer. But this is just the nature of visualization turned into procrastination. You have something inside you that is afraid of the unknown, and instead of investigating what will happen if you will say hi, what then order, so hi, how are you, to or how is it going, to a computer, you just keep visualizing it for a month. That's not a good strategy, and this would translate into a lot of mistakes that you will make of this kind later on. So just try to avoid this procrastination, this negative side of visualization. How do you do that? One easy solution is set a deadline. The nice thing about a conference or a workshop is you have a deadline. You know that you have to be in a very particular date at a very particular time, and that's exactly when you are able to organize all your preparation towards that. And then if you're smart and you're using your time properly, then you decide how much time you will spend every day until you reach this point. So this gives you a deadline. If you are in a writing, set yourself a writing deadline. That's something that you can easily do. If you're in the gym, for me, the exercises that I do are very, very, very regimented. So I know that every 2 days a week, it's the same days, it's the same hour in the same days, it's the same place. I would just be doing the same exercise. And I would do it like this for month after month after month, and nothing would be allowed to break this sequence. So the only place of for me to procrastinate is if I would, leave my home 15 minutes later, which I sometimes do, and I regret that, or if I would spend an extra half a minute thinking before an exercise, a minute, 2 minutes. I always have a watch with me. I try to prevent this from happening, but there will be short procrastinations. They'll be very negligible. They don't matter much. So the biggest problem that I have is actually with using languages, and by this I mean languages that I'm not 100% fluent in. So I don't have a problem in Hebrew or in English. I do have a problem in Danish and other languages that I know a little bit less, so German or French, I really find it very difficult to set particular times to do that. So that's why, for example, now I study Danish with a private teacher. I know that I'm going to meet her at exactly a particular time, and this organizes my entire week towards that. I know that I can prepare every day a little bit, and then I do my homework before that, and this leads me to do that. That's the power of a deadline. And if you cannot have one engineered for you, then just make one up and try to stick to it. The other tool is really to make sure that your visualization is structured in a way that is useful. And that's why every job requires a different type of planning. If you are about to present in front of the audience, and there's a particular technique, and I put a video on that in the channel, in which I explain exactly how you prepare for each session of presentation in a very particular way. If you are going to write, you're not just thinking about it in your head. You have a very specific way to structure the ideas on the paper. So the visualization doesn't just require a deadline determination, it requires a system where you can say, I'm going to take a certain amount of steps in a particular sequence, and this is exactly what will lead me towards my goal. So think about that at the beginning. Okay, before you start to visualize how you solve a task, think through how you should visualize and how you should plan towards the execution of the task itself. Okay, so that's this is what will help you to get all the benefits, all the advantages of visualization, and as little of the negative elements of it as possible. Finally, there is a surprise that I kept to the end, and that really is the golden ticket to improving. It's not forward visualization, it's backward visualization. Try to assess what you've already done. This is something that so many people neglect, and I think that's a very big mistake. You cannot really get better in anything without constantly giving yourself feedback on what you've been doing before. So that's why I keep a very, very specific system of journaling, where I write everything that I do throughout the day. And I would write, for example, how many pages I wrote, usually even how many words I wrote in this particular session, between what hour and what hour. If I wasted an hour or two, I would just write that also. So I will have a very, very clear vision of my day. And I believe this is something that helps me to improve over the months and the years, because I'm able to see, at the end of the week, I would usually go back and look at the days, and I would see how much I managed to write, how much I managed to produce, and what kind of changes in my lifestyle were conducive to exactly these developments. So that's exactly what I recommend that you do. So you always visualize backwards. Try to think, what did I do in the last 2 hours? Why did I do yesterday? Why did I do this week? And what could I have done differently in this respect? How could I have improved? If you are given a lecture, every exercise lecture, I would write myself a feedback. So that's exactly, it trained my mind to always try to look back and say, how could I do better? Usually, I'm sorry that I didn't do it with my actual lectures as detailed a way as I would expect, because usually at a conference, there's all the time people around you. It can be many hours that you can actually open a computer and think about it. But if I could find a technical way to do it immediately and say, okay, I'll be just talking for half an hour. What did I do wrong? Okay, what did I do well? How can I improve? That's a very, very useful technique. So any form of journaling, any form of feedbacking for yourself is very, very useful. I can tell you that when I go to the gym, and I do it more and more, I really try to think about the exercises that I did. I would check exactly the minute at which I finished a particular set, and I would try to go in my mind and I would see, what exactly was I doing? How did I move? Where did I feel pain? At the beginning of a movement, at the end of a movement? If I did a squat, let's just 10 times, what was my tempo? Was I going all the time the same speed, or was I going slower towards the end? What was the difficult part? What elements were risky for my knees, for my back? All these things I really carry with me, and that's a form of backward visualization. Just trying to assess everything that I did in a particular exercise. For me, the biggest challenge now is to try to think about making a backward visualization on language learning, which is one of the main topics that we are often discussing in these videos. I try to think about, I still don't have a good method to do that, but I really try to give much more thought into it, especially after I make a class with my private teacher, or I have an option to speak, whether it's speaking for just 10 minutes with a colleague or teaching for 3 hours. I would really try to think, how well did I do? Not just if I made a particular grammatic mistake, or if I was, again, missing the right word, but was my rhythm correct, convincing? Did I manage to make myself interesting, appealing to my audience? Was I convincing? I'm really trying to look for ways to describe what would I constitute as a good presentation in a language that I'm not fully fluent in, or a presentation that requires more work. And that's exactly the challenge that I'm thinking about right now. And I think that it's a very useful use of my time. So the more you think about your successes and your small failures, and you try to improve, the better your improvement and the faster it will come. That is all for today about visualization, how to use it properly to get the huge advantages that it has, to avoid the negative sides, and to use backward visualization to get yourself better. If you like the video, please like it. I would be very happy if you subscribe to my channel. And as always, keep learning.